Okay, I want to share with you a few thoughts this morning and keep sharing really on what it means to be a church and what it means to be part of a church. I've come to see just how much our view of church is really not influenced by the Bible, but by our culture and how we understand words like community and family through a 21st century Western lens, which is a million miles away from the lens which Jesus and the New Testament writers saw words like community and family. And it's very challenging to try and understand and grasp what Jesus and the New Testament writers were saying if we try and interpret it through the lens of our culture and the water in which we swim. It becomes really challenging to understand it. And it's hard to do anything other than that because for the most part we don't realize the waters that we swim in. We're not quite aware of just how much our culture has shaped us and formed us, and we look around and we see what we think is normal, and we forget it's only normal for like the last 3 years, for instance, and it's definitely not normal for most of history. But this morning I want to get us thinking about that word community and what it might mean and look like. Just let me kind of briefly recap on where we've been going. We've been in Acts 1 and 2 when we said this: the central task of the church is to show and tell the good news of Jesus. That's what you get when you read Acts, which is this period of time just after Jesus has died and risen, the start, the birth of the church. They are really clear. They are practically showing the love of Jesus. They are feeding people, they are caring for people, they are housing people, but they're also telling people about Jesus. They are standing up no matter what other people are saying, no matter the opposition, no matter the fact they end up in prison and jail. They are willing to tell people about the beautiful news of Jesus. So the central task of the church is to show and tell. So we've been talking about the need to do both, to faithfully show and tell. As Phil was sharing last week, it's not enough to just act a little bit like Jesus and hope people work it out. There also has to be a place of invitation to let people know, because there are lots of nice people out there. There are lots of not nice people as well, but lots of nice people out there who do lots of wonderful things. But my experience is that a nice person with Jesus is even more wonderful than just a nice person without him. And so we looked at Acts 2 where it says they devoted themselves to the apostles' teaching and to fellowship, to the breaking of bread and prayer. And I put it this way: they were learning together about Jesus and the way of Jesus. They were sharing together their resources, time and energy. They were eating together, sharing and investing in relationships, and they were worshiping together, rhythms to keep focused on Jesus. These were like these 4 pillars that the church was built upon. And we're just kind of going, okay, yeah, we're learning together. One of the things we're doing right now is learning together. Sharing together, we're kind of learning how to do that. Eating together, we already did that, and we're starting to do that more and more. There's something about just eating together. One commentator on the book of Luke said Jesus is either going to a meal, having a meal, or coming from a meal. I like that Jesus. And my stomach probably don't, but I like that Jesus. But he was always in and amongst people, which is what we're going to look at today, because Acts 2 uses that word fellowship. I've called it sharing together, and it's a very kind of churchy word, but really it means a commitment. They were committed to sharing their life, their time, their stuff, their resources, their energy. There was a commitment to doing that together. And I want to explore what that might look like. First of all, by running you through some of the things that happen when Jesus starts calling his little band of merry men together. And looking at those men and the people he called together. And I want you do that to challenge some of our conceptions and preconceptions about what community is. And then I want to say a couple of things about what it isn't and finish upon what it might be. And then next week we're going to talk about why we find it so hard. Hi, gorgeous. As Jesus was walking beside the Sea of Galilee, he saw 2 brothers, Simon called Peter and his brother Andrew. They were casting a net into the lake, for they were fishermen. Come, follow me, Jesus said, and I will send you out to fish for people. And once they left their nets and followed him. Going on from there, he saw 2 other brothers, James and his brother John. They were in a boat with their father preparing their nets. Jesus called them, and immediately they left their boat and followed him. So Jesus walks past some fishermen, says, follow me, and then, to our Western mind, makes some cheesy joke about making them fishers of men. But to the disciples, to the fishermen, this is not some cheesy joke, cheesy play on words. This is an incredible call. Because fishers of men was an idiom in first century Galilee that basically meant he was a great rabbi or teacher who would capture the mind and imagination of the hearer and then invite them to be like him. He's not just saying, come and have a nice time. He's saying, hey, guys, want to be like me? Come and follow me. And of course, the dream of every Jewish boy was to be a rabbi. That was the pinnacle. I don't know what it is today, but that then was the pinnacle of life. If you could be a rabbi and be a follower and have disciples, you would reach the echelons of high society, the best thing you could possibly do. And of course, to be a rabbi, you also had to have learned the whole of the Old Testament off by heart and also learn the Mishnah and the Talmud, which was the commentary on the Old Testament, off by heart. So most people didn't get it. The fact they are fishermen tells you that somebody along the way said, you are not good enough to be a rabbi. Then Jesus comes along and goes, hey boys, I think you're good enough. I think you can do it. I think you can be like me. There's this powerful thing going on behind the scenes where Jesus goes, hey boys, you've been told you're not good enough. You've been told you can't make it. You've been told you'll never manage to live up to the standard, but I'm telling you that you can, and all you have to do is come and spend some time with me. So they do. But notice this. Right from the start, the call to follow Jesus is not an individual call. It is not an individual call. It is a call of brothers and 2 more brothers, and they're going to become 4, and eventually they're going to become 12, and they're going to do it together. We're going to talk about this more next week, but the cult of individualism is killing most of what we do as a church and most of what we do as a society. There was nothing. The idea of being an individual did not exist in Jesus' time. It didn't exist actually up till about probably 1950. But we'll talk about that more next week. It's one of the reasons you find it so hard. This is the cultural water you swim in that means you find it so hard to actually be part of a community and family other than the family you get told you have to have. Because you swim in waters of individualism. Matthew 9. And Jesus went on from there. He saw a man named Matthew sitting at the tax collector's booth. Follow me, he told him. Matthew got up and followed him. While Jesus was having dinner at Matthew's house, many tax collectors and sinners came and ate with him and his disciples. Okay, now this is good fun. So first of all, he calls some Jewish fishermen. So you've got some good, Torah observant, to some degree, boys in there. They go to synagogue, they say the prayers, they start every day with a Shema and all that sort of stuff. And then you've got a tax collector. And they all go around for dinner. And Matthew invites his mates round, which is more tax collectors and sinners, which is basically a Bible code word for not good Jewish boys. So these good Jewish lads end up in the house of a tax collector, huge major cultural challenges because Matthew is the man who's collecting taxes on behalf of the occupying Roman force. So Matthew is the man that the fishermen have to give their fish to pay their taxes every day at something like 60 or 70%. You think you pay a lot of tax. And now they're all having dinner together. They're enjoying dinner together. So right from the beginning, Jesus is gathering this group of men who have very little in common and much they can fight over. And then we get a list of some other people who were involved, and we won't read it all. But first of all, it says, Jesus called his 12 disciples and gave them authority to drive out evil spirits and heal every disease and sickness. Notice he says he gave them. If generally the church was going to do it, we'd call them out one by one, individually, and we'd pray from individually and give them an individual word. I don't think Jesus did that. He went, hey boys, this is for you, crack on, go for it. But we've become so individual, it's got to be about us. I need God to talk to me. No, we need God to talk to us. I don't think he gave them an individual word or individually released them. He gave it to them. He released them. And we read that somebody there's a guy called Simon the Zealot. The Zealots were a right-wing Jewish insurgency group that would conduct violent guerrilla-like terrorist activity on unsuspecting Roman soldiers in a quest for Israeli independence. A bit like the IRA. So, basically, Simon the Zealot's a terrorist who is killing the Roman soldiers who Matthew works for, who is taxing the Jewish fishermen who are also there. And Jesus says, hey boys, let's all follow each other and spend some time together. Imagine you text, morning traitor, morning murderer, morning thief. Imagine the level of tension, hostility, bitterness, and acrimony between just those two. I was trying to have a little think about who, in today's day and age, you might invite together if you wanted 12 very different people who could fight together. But then it depressed me about how many people you could include, so I didn't go there. But imagine if you want to the 12 people you think of who would least get on together and then realize they're the exact people Jesus says, I want you to be the start of my community. There's another story where two of the disciples, James and John, come with their mum. Get this, they bring their mum along. And she kneels down at Jesus' feet. She's really kind of playing it up a little bit. So she kneels down at Jesus' feet and she says, oh, Jesus, please, when your kingdom comes, she's thinking there's going to be she's still not got it. She's thinking that they're going to overthrow the Romans and kick them out. And she's going, Jesus, please, would you have my boys sit at your right and your left? If Jesus was going to be prime minister, she'd be going, can one be foreign secretary and one be chancellor, please? And Jesus very graciously tells her she hasn't got a clue what she's talking about. But the boys kind of go, no, we do. We know exactly what we're talking about. No, you don't, boys, but never mind. And then what happens is the others here, what you realize is later on in the story, is actually they've kind of taken Jesus off to one side to have a little bit of a private word without the knowledge of the other two. So they're having this little conversation. Come on, Jesus, please let me. And then the other 10 hear about it, and they go, what the chuff are you doing? You got your mum to ask for you? Like, seriously? Like, this is what Jesus says. Jesus called them together and said, you know the rulers of the Gentiles lord it over them, and their high officials exercise authority over them. Not so with you. Instead, whoever wants to be great among you must be your servant, and whoever wants to be first must be your slave, just as the Son of Man did not come to be served, but to serve, and to give his life as a ransom for many. Jesus says, listen, boys, I know the rest of the world is all about power and control and who can have the most and all the power dynamics, but this is not how we do things in the kingdom of God. To live in this new community under the rule of God is to live by a whole other set of relational dynamics. It's to live not with power at the center, but with love at the center. Jesus don't use that word, but that's what he's saying. He's going, boys, it's not about who can have the most power and who can have the best seat in the house and who can... No, it's about love. It's about laying down your life for the people who are around you. The community he's building is a place where those who want to learn, Jesus calls them people disciples, to become like him, a self-sacrificial servant who is consumed with love at the deepest level. The church then, if Jesus is building this community and says you can be like him, the church then is a place. It must be a place where we allow Jesus to build a place where those who want to learn can become like him, self-sacrificial servants who are consumed with love at the deepest level. And the vision of life together that Jesus had for his disciples is very different from what many of us hear when we hear the word community. And I want to clarify some mistakes I think we make when we think about it. Because a lot of the time, well, first of all, in this day and age, we've mistaken connection for community. We think that if we're connected, that's a community. The idea of an online community is an oxymoron, which is like two contradictory words coming together. It's impossible to have an online community. You can have online connections, but you can't have online community. By the very definition of the words, it's impossible. We are more connected than ever, and yet all the stats show that as a nation and a world, we are more lonely than ever. We have all these tools and apps to stay connected, and yet study after study shows there is a direct connection between social media and internet use and loneliness. The more you use digital technology, the more lonely you are likely to be. The more you use digital technology, the more lonely you are likely to be. One author writes this, face-to-face conversation is the most human and humanizing thing we do. Fully present to one another, we learn to listen. It's where we develop the capacity for empathy. It's where we experience the joy of being heard and being understood. Think how much even of our conversation now isn't face-to-face. Think how much of it is WhatsApp and text and video call and all the rest. Think how much we are connected but yet separate. Think how much we are connected and yet not actually together. We have been sold a lie that connection is community. It is not. It is not. We've said this before, but you are the commodity. In all the internet stuff, you are the commodity. That's why you don't pay anything for it. The price is you giving your attention. That is the price you pay for it all. It does not come free. It comes at a deep cost to your sense of community and to your sense of ability to be together. Because it steals and steals and steals. I have now completely come off it all. And I used to think that I'd missed out. I haven't missed out on all. Well, I might have done, but I don't know about it. If you want to read a great book, by the way, there's a book called Stolen Focus by a guy called Johann Hari. It is absolutely fantastic about the effects of the digital age on our minds, bodies, all that stuff, and why we can't pay attention. It's basically about why we can't pay attention anymore. And he goes into all the internet stuff. He also goes into diet. He goes into architecture. He goes into all these different reasons why. It's a phenomenal book, but just be careful, because when I read it, I came off all my social media. I know some of you have to be on it for all sorts of reasons, and it can be used greatly, but I came to the place where I thought, I was an addict, basically. Most of you are. Because if you can't put it down the moment somebody says something, that means you're addicted. You just got to admit it and go, okay, yeah. I realized I was not strong enough to beat some of the greatest minds in our world. Because the greatest minds in our world are paid a heck of a lot of money to keep you on it. And if you think you're cleverer than them, okay, go for it. I decided I won't. So I got out of a fight I couldn't win. Secondly, so connectivity, and let's go on here, because the author, Sherry Tuckle there, she argues that we're just not made to keep in touch with so many people. And again, study after study of brain scans, neuroplasticity, hunter-gatherer tribes, military theory have shown us that 100 to 150 people is a max number of people we are capable of relationship with. Your brain has not evolved to catch up with technology. The maximum number of people. So the fact that your Facebook page says, probably, if you're old, Facebook, if you're not, TikTok, but says that you've got 500, no, you don't. You don't, do you? You don't. And if you do, you ain't got a clue who they are or what they've been doing. Technology means we're connected to many more than that. And as a result, connectivity is up, but community is actually way down, because connection is not community. Secondly, so connection is not community. Secondly, we mistake chemistry for community. We mistake chemistry for community. Chemistry is that neurobiological spark or kick we get when we have that instant connection with somebody who's like us. So this morning, I chatted with Luke. Luke likes cricket. I like cricket. Hey, it's really easy. We have a conversation. I use some terminology that some of you won't understand. He gets it. It's really good. Okay, that's chemistry. Okay, we like the same thing. We enjoy the same thing. It's really easy. That's not community. That's chemistry. And it's very different. C.S. Lewis said the root of all friendship is you too? You like that band? You like to do that? You've been there? You have this history? You live in that place? You went to that school? That's the basis of all friendship. The idea you find someone who sees the world like you do, or has some of the same experiences you do, and there's this spark within us. But we can have community with people that we have very little chemistry with, and we have chemistry with people that we have very little community with. Now, of course, both together, hey, that's the dream. But when I'm talking about church and community, I am not talking about chemistry. Chemistry is just a spark you get because you're similar. But actually, we'll get onto it. So community is not chemistry. You don't need to have that spark of chemistry. They have 7 things in common in order to experience community, as I'm going to show you. Although I think we have believed a lie. I think many of us have mistaken community for chemistry. And because there's no chemistry, we've concluded we are not part of a community. Because we've not found anybody who we click with and get on with and can just instantly, automatically share with, we've gone, oh no, there's no community here. But what if community, if it isn't connectivity and it isn't chemistry, what is it? Well, we shared a couple of weeks ago in Greek the words koinonia. It gets translated community, fellowship, partnership, having things in common. But when you explore all the definitions, community is always people that you live by, that you physically interact with. Hence why online community is an oxymoron. Community by definition is people that are in your life in a physical way. But it's also this idea of common interest. The root word from Latin is communitas. It means people you have something in common with. So the gym, it's a community. The cricket club, it's a community because I've got cricket in common, or I've got the gym in common, or I've got knitting in common, or whatever else it might be. But we have something in common. We have Jesus in common. It's not our political persuasion, it's not our ethnicity, it's not our cultural preference, it's not our income levels, our educational background. But if you know Jesus or are wondering about Jesus, then there is a common denominator within each and every one of us. But what I realized as I pondered these thoughts is that we have somewhere deep down decided that uniting around Jesus and Jesus alone is not enough. We've decided, well, yeah, there's Jesus, but then I need something else. I need some chemistry. I need some other place. I need something else. Oh, really? Do you remember what I told you about those guys? Plenty of reasons to kill each other. But of course, again, in today's culture, we've almost moved from community to tribalism. Tribalism is, you could define it as, let's find something we hate about somebody else and join together around that. Community is, let's find something we love about something and unite around that. Of course, if you get all the parents of under fives in a room, they can all talk about who changed the smelliest poo and who had least sleep and all that stuff. Of course, they've got something in common. You get all the musicians in a room. You get all the book lovers in a room. Of course, it makes it a little bit easier. But it also loses something because it doesn't reflect what Jesus built. If Jesus wanted to model community based around commonality, he would have picked 12 Jewish fishermen or 12 tax collectors or 12 zealots, but he didn't. He picked some fishermen and some tax collectors and some zealots and some other people from all these different places who had very little connection, and if you read the Gospels, very little chemistry other than fighting each other and arguing and squabbling most of the time. Even in picking those people, he shows how you build community. You get a very diverse group of people from different backgrounds with different stories, and you follow Jesus together. Because the biblical idea of community is that we have Jesus in common, and that's enough to bind us together. Because if we're looking for something else, what we're saying is that Jesus is not enough. And of course, that makes it harder. But for me, that's why any church that is built around another commonality as well, whether that be ethnicity or race or whatever, it's not actually a true reflection of church. Because the only thing you need in common to be part of a church community is Jesus. I mean, we sang just before we finished, Jesus, the anthem of my heart, Jesus, the heart, proper Yorkshire coming out, Jesus, the anchor of my soul. Okay, so what does that mean in community? Well, if he's the anchor, that's the thing that holds you in place, not the fact that somebody else loves what you love. And as you follow through the early church, you see that in Acts, you get different cultures and languages and ethnicities are added, and the one thing they have in common is Jesus. But of course, too often, it's too easy to focus on what we don't have in common rather than what we do. But again, that's the cultural water you swim in. Let's find something that I don't like about you and start a protest group about it. Okay, no, how about let's find something we do like together? You know, I'm going to go and be part of this Pentecost praise event because I chairship the Christians together. And I know right now in the Baptist church and the Anglican church and the Methodist church and the URC and all the rest, they will be doing very different things this morning. And there's plenty of things I could find that would be very different about them. Plenty of things we may well disagree on. But I can unite around some things. I can choose to find what's common, and I can choose to find what we agree on, and I can choose to unite around that. That's why I bother to do it all. Because maybe we need somebody who's going to stand up and go, look, what can we agree together about? And go, okay, yeah, we'll differ. Okay, fine. But what have we got together? Well, we've got Jesus together. We've got Jesus together. Think about it. If you've come to know Jesus, then you have the same story of healing and redemption. All right, outworked 1,000 different ways, but the same story at its most basic level. If you have met with Jesus, and he has touched your heart and your life in a way that nothing else did, then you have something in common, don't you? You have a common sacred book that you might occasionally read if you're wise. You have a common future. Think of all that you've got in common just with Jesus. If you put him at the middle. The problem was being fooled into thinking that that's not enough, that uniting around Jesus isn't enough, but the biblical story says that's not true. Jesus himself brought together 12 men who were very different and said that uniting around him and his way of life was enough of something to unite around. And it's enough of us to unite around. That doesn't mean that, parents of under fives or musicians or book lovers shouldn't get together, but what it does mean is there should also be space where the only thing that unites us is Jesus. Let me finish with some words from just 4 of the chapters at the end of Paul's letter to the Romans. This is just in 4 chapters of one book in the Bible. Be devoted to one another in brotherly love. Honor one another above yourselves. Live in harmony with one another. Love one another. Stop passing judgment on one another. Accept one another. Instruct one another. Greet one another with a holy kiss. You only have to say those words if those things are not happening. You see, and there's over 30 of these one another commands about how to live in community. The New Testament writers assume 2 very simple things about those who know Jesus that I don't think can be assumed of many modern Western believers, you and me. First of all, they assume that you're in community. And that's not like turning up to church every now and again. You're in a community when you are known and you know well. And 2, they assume it's really messy. They assume that there's all this infighting going on and all these things going on in people's minds that make it challenging. Otherwise, why do you have to write all that? They assume there are people in the community who you need to honor above yourself because you think you're better than them and you're full of contempt for them. There are people you need to learn to live in harmony with because there's very little that's harmonious about your relationship. There are people you need to stop passing judgment on because they live life differently to you. They use their money differently, their time differently, they parent differently, they care for their elders differently, they see the world differently, and you need to stop passing judgment on them and learn to love them. There are people you need to learn to accept because you don't want to, and people you need to instruct because they have a clue, and people you need to greet with a holy kiss, even though you would like to greet them with a holy slap. And there are people you need to bear with and confess to, and people you need to love. The New Testament writers have this inbuilt assumption that you're in community and it's messy. There's all this instruction because church, this group of people is a place where you are learning to love and be loved. Where if you've accepted the call of Jesus, you are learning to be a fisher of people, to be a self-sacrificial servant who is consumed with love at the deepest level like Jesus. And what is the school that Jesus wants to put you in? A community of people who are going to press all your buttons. The question is it's not really being in community that's the goal or the aim, but living in community is a tool that is necessary to learn to be a person of love. And again, this is why, it'd be wonderful, wouldn't it? And this is why we see it, I remember there was a time in America where, the church services would be built around the style of music you liked. So there'd be 7 services. One would be folk, and one would be pop, and one would be classic, and one would be rock, and one would be punk rock, and one would be, maybe not Black Death in American churches, but but that's the very opposite of the school of community. It's just complete consumerism. The question is not whether you want to live in community or not. The question is, do you want to be a person of love? Do you want to become like Jesus? Does your heart want to melt at people whose hearts are breaking? Do you want to have an answer for people? Do you want to have empathy? Do you want to move in compassion? Do you want to look at the world and cry with it? Do you want to feel the pain of the world but also have something to offer? Do you want to be that person who can offer hope? Do you want to be transformed to a person of love? If you do, there is no option but to be part of a community. There is no option. And the quicker you want to learn, the harder you throw yourself in. If you want to be a person of love, then you must put yourself in a place where you can learn how to do all those things on the slide. That place is a community of people who are all working to do the same, which is why we don't like it. Most of the time, when we decide we're going to check out, duck out, last minute text, bit tired, all that. It is that, but deeper down, it's also because I don't want to learn that. That's the reality. Deep down, I don't want to learn that because actually I do want to slap them and I've got to greet them with a kiss and I don't want to. Okay, well just be real about it then. Well, you all laugh because you all know it's true. I'm just daft enough to say it out loud. But when you go, and inside you just want to go bang, and you go mwah, something happens on the inside of you. And right there, you make a step towards being a person of love. But of course, if you stay at home, all you think about is how much you want to slap them. And that gets bigger. And then next time you want to slap me even harder. And then you decide before you know it, you're hiding behind tins of beans so you don't see me, Nasty. Okay, but do you want to be a person of love? Do you want to be able to offer what Jesus offered? Do you want to go deeper in this place of learning to love and learning to be a self-sacrificial servant who is consumed with love at the deepest level like Jesus? Okay, well, you best start throwing yourself into a life of communion then. Because that's how it happens. I don't know any other way, and Jesus didn't show any other way of how it happens. But listen, the biblical idea of community is that we have Jesus in common, and that's enough to bind us together. That's enough to bind us. Is that hard? Yes. Does it take effort? Yes. Will you like it? Probably not. Does that really matter? No. Because ultimately it's a choice. Do I want to be like Jesus or not? And the surprising thing is, when you make those choices, or have them forced upon you, as was forced upon me recently, I'll tell you that story in a moment, you might actually enjoy it. So Friday night, we had a games night. Friday night's also Alyssa's cricket night. I like cricket. I like watching cricket. And Faye said, why do you always get to go? I like it. It's my happy place. I just sit, watch it. Nobody, nobody puts any pressure on me to do anything. It's nice. She's like, well, I want to go. I'm like, yeah, but you like games. She's like, yeah, I know. What, you want me to go to the games now? She's like, yeah, you get to go to cricket on Saturday. It'd be good for you. Well, I was grumpy for about 2 days. But you see, this is the power of having somebody who holds you accountable, isn't it? She went, go on. I want to watch cricket. I want Alyssa to know that I value it as much as you. You always get to take. I want to go. I want to enjoy the time with her. I want to have the car journey. I want to watch. I want to do all that stuff. You go down there. And I did. I had a great time. I played Splendor Minecraft that John had made in Cambodia. It was great. Great time chatting with Paul Clifford, who I've not talked to in a little while, just laughing together, joking together. I loved it. Was it what I wanted to do? Not really. I'd have rather sat at cricket and watched that. Could have got a pint at cricket as well. But I'm learning to be accountable, to be in community, whether I like it or not. Because I'm learning that's where my heart gets changed. That's where my heart gets changed. And I actually found out I enjoyed it. And I lost, and I still enjoyed it. In fact, I got thrashed. That is a miracle, actually, for me. But listen, if you want to become a person of love, it ain't going to happen by turning up every now and again on a Sunday morning. It just ain't. It's not how it works. I mean, yeah, you might experience something, it might be good, but if you really are serious about being committed to be a person of love and at changing the environments that you're in and bringing love to those environments, then you've got to immerse yourself in the people that press your buttons and trust that in that you will be transformed and you will develop a deep sense of community and togetherness. And listen, it's tough. We're going to talk about next week, we're going to talk about individualism, we're going to talk about idealism, we're going to talk about the intimidation of it. We're going to talk about all those things next week. But for now, we'll finish there. Shall we pray? Father, I want to thank you for just the incredible model that you shared, Lord. And we see, Lord, I always imagine, Lord, some of the times you talk to the disciples that you must start with a big sigh as you like, oh, for crying out loud, boys. And Lord, we see that in ourselves often, Lord. But you showed us that if we want to learn how it is to love, what it means to be people of love and to care for and love our communities and our families and our friends and our neighbours, then we need to learn how to bear with one another and forgive one another and love one another. Father, we thank you for the incredible sense that there is. And I pray, Lord, that you would, Lord, if there's anything in our minds, Lord, whether it's chemistry or connectivity or that kind of stop us, that have got in the way, or whether we've just believed the lie that you're not enough to build a community around, Father, would you help us realign and reshift our thinking to be more aligned with the words of Jesus and the words of the New Testament writers. In the beautiful name of Jesus. Amen.